It was a cloudy and freezing evening. I was waiting for the train on the concrete slab that is called the station. I was going home from my groupmate who lives here. This is some godforsaken village. It was his birthday, so I spent this weekend at his house. I can't say that it's horrible to live here. He has a farm, a nice house. I can't even say that it's far from civilization. It doesn't seem that far away, especially when you get on the train. Lean your head on the window and close your eyes. That's what I wanted to do after 2 party days. I stood on the platform while a nasty damp wind was blowing across my body, getting to my very bones. There were still a few people with me, 3 guys and a girl. They were joking and laughing all the time. I was trying to warm at least my hands. This isn't a regular train station where one can go inside to warm up and drink coffee. There were only huge concrete slabs and a couple of poles with lanterns. I couldn't even see the lights of the houses that stood nearby. There was a small, well-trodden path to them. That's all. There was nothing else here. I don't understand how people can live here. Although I've never tried it, probably I would get used to it. I don't know. I took out my phone and checked the time. The train was a little late, and yet the cold was getting under my skin. It was hot before the weekend, so I was wearing nothing warm, but it got cold during that 2 days. And even the jacket given to me by my friend didn't really save the situation. I checked the time again and noticed a small approaching light in the distance. Finally, I muttered out loud. The train got to the station and stopped with a nasty creak and hiss. The door opened and I went inside and sat down by the window, putting a backpack full of all sorts of delicious homemade goods under my feet. The passenger wagon was half empty. Only a guy and a girl were sitting in the back, along with a granny reading a newspaper with an intelligent expression on her face, and the group that was waiting for the train on the platform with me. As soon as we all sat down, the train immediately started moving. I love this atmosphere. The sound of wheels, passing lamppost, and a dim lamp in the passenger wagon. The only thing you can do is take out your headphones from your pocket, turn on the music, and look out the window until your eyes want to close. I had an hour and a half of that ahead. All I was dreaming of was getting home and taking a hot bath. I slowly began to fall asleep while I was looking out the window and listened to the sound of wheels. There was enough room since no one was sitting next to me, and I sprawled all over the seat using my backpack as a pillow. I was already snoring in less than 5 minutes, but suddenly I woke up. You won't believe what. I just fell on the floor. And by the way, I hit my back hard. Of course, I immediately came to my senses and grimaced in pain as I tried to get to my feet. The group of guys and I were the only people in the wagon. There was no one else. They probably came out earlier. I sat down and looked at the phone. Damn, it was only 40 minutes. I didn't want to sleep anymore. I decided to surf the internet, but since the train was still in the middle of nowhere, there was no trace of the internet. I got myself comfortable and looked out the window. Not even the street lights anymore. During the 20 minutes, I could see only the forest. But suddenly, there were lights, and the train began to slow down. The guys collected their things and got out of the train. Strange. For some reason, I thought that they would go to the city. Okay, why not? I got myself comfortable again and prepared for the departure as a woman entered the passenger wagon. Well, she was about 40 years old. She was well-groomed and modernly dressed. She sat down not far from me, but not too close. Well, nothing special, I thought back then. I didn't pay much attention to that woman. I laid down on my backpack and fell asleep again. I woke up again about 20 minutes later. Why? Not because of the stop. I woke up because some insect was crawling on me, or to be more precise, on my face, like a fly or a mosquito. I didn't care about that damn thing. Just swatted it quickly and back to sleep. But suddenly, one thought crept into my head. It was November. The winter is coming. There should be no flies or mosquitoes. That thought woke me up. I opened my eyes and saw the insects fly in the passenger wagon, but they weren't flies. They were so strange, and there were so many of them. I've never seen anything like that before. There was only me and that woman in the passenger wagon. At first, I wasn't even interested in her, but later, after watching her for a while, I realized that she didn't move at all. With my eyes bulging, I continued to look at her and tried to keep the damn insects away from me. I noticed another detail. Most of these insects were right above her. The big swarm was flying around her. After a while, I decided to get up and check her. There was not a single move for 20 minutes. That was strange. Maybe she fell asleep, I thought while going to her. Well, I'll check it out. I went up to her and she scared the hell out of me. She sat like a statue. I couldn't call her alive. Of course, there was flesh, and she was a person, but it felt like she's a statue, honestly. What's even more horrible, the insects had swarmed in her open mouth. For God's sakes, there were a lot of them. I couldn't even see her teeth because of them. I stepped back, covering my mouth with my hand. She had almost black veins on her arms and neck, and she was of unnatural color. And one more thing, her eyes. They were open all the time, and they were constantly looking at me, like Mona Lisa. She was constantly looking at me wherever I stand. This terrible and disgusting picture caused me fear and anxiety. All I wanted was to be home with closed doors and with the lights on everywhere, but my home was far away from there. I tried to go to another wagon, but just as I took a few steps to the door, I heard a crunch. I turned around and saw her head leaning on her shoulder. What the hell? What the hell is going on here? She had just been sitting normally a moment ago. What just happened? That crunch made my blood run cold. I need to get out of here as soon as possible. I ran to the door and heard another crunch and had no desire to turn around and look at her. But still, I saw what was happening there. I saw it in the reflection of the wagon window. Now one of her arms was bent on the opposite side. What the hell? That's the only question that's been on my mind. I began to pull the handle of the door again. It was closed, as I understood it. And another crunch. I look out the window again. She's already up. She was running her eyes over the wagon as if she's looking for something. I froze, the sound of the train's wheels mingling with my heart. She stood still. The only eyes were looking for something. I plucked up the courage to rush immediately to the other end of the wagon, hoping that the door would be open there. Why on earth did I look at the other end of the wagon? She was already standing in the middle. How come? She was in the end, wasn't she? What's going on? I started to pull the handle of the door, and again I heard a crunch, and again I looked out the window. Jesus, she was standing right behind me. I froze, and so did she. I didn't know what to do next. How do I get out? She just seemed to press me to the door. For some reason, I thought that the slightest movement of mine wouldn't do anything well, but yet, this door wasn't locked. I stood still, like a statue. Then I decided to open it. I slowly reached for the handle, and I can already feel her hand on my back. I froze again. What should I do? It was the only thought spinning in my head. I decided to open the door abruptly, jump out into another wagon and slam it just as abruptly. So I did, counting to 3 in my mind, and I jerked the door open and jumped out into the other wagon. The sharp pain in my back knocked me down, and I hit my head. I didn't have time to close the door, so she was standing right over me again. I was no longer driven by sanity, but by animal terror. I realized that she was reacting to my movements. I began to crawl back, and now I could see how she was moving. It was a nightmare. She came towards me in jerks, and each jerk ended in a strange pose. Her hands seemed to break and then return to their original position, just like her legs. Her eyes were still running over the wagon just like they had a few minutes ago, but sometimes they stopped on me, striking terror into me. I froze again, and so did she. She was so terrible. Her image has been haunting me ever since I saw her. I was lying on the floor of the wagon. My arms and legs were already beginning to go numb, so I didn't move at all. I couldn't lie like this for a long time, and after about 10 minutes, I still moved my leg, and it again rushed at me. I didn't wait for my fate, so I ran to the other end of the wagon. But there I found an emergency brake. I managed to look out the window before that and realized that we were already approaching the city. I was pulling the emergency brake. The train screeched to a stop and I opened the car door and jumped out into the forest. She jumped out after me. I heard the crunch of her bones behind me and ran as fast as I could. Thanks to God, there was a path through the forest. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight, so as not to run into a tree, for example. But still, I had to break away from her a little. About 10 minutes later, I heard the train start again. In the distance, I could already see the lights of the city. So I went to them. My heart was still beating like hell. I was constantly looking back, and I was very afraid to see her behind me again. And yet it wasn't there, and after walking about a mile, I calmed down a little. But I still turned around. I came out of the forest alive. Thank God. The road was already a few feet away from me. I finally reached civilization. I almost gave God my soul in that damned wagon. Can't be so easy, I thought that moment. I was walking between the trees. Suddenly I saw some movement behind them. I stopped. I felt terror again. My legs went out. It's her again. But how did she end up here? How did she do it? I was already cried out. I definitely saw her head there. She peeked out from behind a tree like a child who cheats in peekaboo without counting to the end and looking at who ran where. So she stood and stared at me. Only her eyes were directed directly at me, not running around as in the passenger wagon. Is it better not to move again? Picking up a huge stick from the ground, I moved towards her. My fear was replaced by anger and hatred, but while I was approaching her, I began to doubt if that would work out. What if something goes wrong? But I tried my best to put them out of my mind, and she came out from behind a tree and moved to meet me. I yelled and hit her in the head. She crunched just like in the wagon, stood for a while, and fell down to the ground. I began to beat her in the stomach with the sharp end of the stick. The liquid black as oil began to ooze from her stomach, and those very insects flew out. When I had finished, I threw down my stick and sat next to her. "What are you?" After that, I heard the crunch again, and she gripped my arm with her hand, so tightly that I could feel her fingers under my skin. But thank God it was all happening next to the road, and my heart-rending scream was heard by some driver. He stopped the car and rushed to me. That creature immediately let go of my hand and rushed into the forest. The driver took a first aid kit from the car and rendered first aid. He asked me about what happened, but I said that I was attacked by a gang. I couldn't say that I was dealing with some kind of evil spirits. He would take me as the mad one. Guy called an ambulance, waited with me for it. In the hospital, a doctor sutured the wounds and sent me home. That's how my trip to my groupmate ended. But there is something that bothers me. Some insects showed up at my home. No, not the ones I saw on the train. I thought it's because of the garbage. Then I cleaned everything up. I couldn't find anything that could attract some kind of creatures. But still, there were a lot of them. One more creepy thing happened last night. After taking a bath, I was going to the bedroom with the phone flashlight on. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that creature in the mirror.